What if the greatest science fiction disaster in cinema history was actually David Lynch's masterpiece, butchered by studio interference that destroyed a visionary's dream? That the film's bizarre elements hide a director's battle against Hollywood greed, and the terrible movie you remember contains genius that audiences were never allowed to see. The impossible book that destroyed directors. Adapting Frank Herbert's Dune was considered the most impossible task in Hollywood, destroying multiple legendary filmmakers before Lynch ever touched the project. What fans rarely discover is that Alejandro Jodorowsky spent 5 years developing a 14-hour version that would have revolutionized cinema forever. His cast included Salvador Dali, Orson Welles, and Mick Jagger in roles that defied conventional storytelling. Jodorowsky's failure wasn't artistic, it was financial. Studios couldn't comprehend a science fiction epic that cost more than Star Wars and required audiences to commit an entire day to viewing. The project's death traumatized Jodorowsky so deeply that he refused to watch Lynch's version, calling it a beautiful book turned into an ugly movie. Ridley Scott attempted adaptation next, but abandoned the project after his brother's death made the dark themes unbearable. Steven Spielberg considered tackling Dune, but concluded that Herbert's universe was too vast for traditional narrative structure. Each failed attempt added layers of expectation and dread that would eventually crush Lynch's vision. When David Lynch accepted the challenge, he inherited not just a complex novel, but the weight of every previous failure. Studio executives had learned the wrong lessons from earlier attempts, believing that commercial success required simplifying Herbert's philosophy into basic adventure storytelling. This fundamental misunderstanding doomed the project before cameras rolled. Lynch's vision versus studio greed. David Lynch entered the Dune project with complete creative control, only to discover that producer Dino De Laurentiis had lied about the extent of his artistic freedom. What emerged was a battle between auteur filmmaking and commercial demands that would destroy Lynch's relationship with Hollywood for decades. Lynch's original screenplay was over 300 pages, envisioning a 3-hour epic that honored Herbert's philosophical complexity. The director planned extensive sequences exploring the Bene Gesserit sisterhood, the ecology of Arrakis, and the political machinations that drive the story. Test audiences found these elements boring, forcing brutal cuts that eliminated the narrative's foundation. The most devastating betrayal involved final cut privileges. De Laurentiis promised Lynch complete editorial control, then seized the film during post-production and handed it to Universal executives who had never read Herbert's novel. They slashed 2 hours of footage, inserted narration that Lynch despised, and added action sequences that contradicted the story's themes. Lynch later revealed that watching the studio's version was more painful than any critical review. They turned my meditation on power and ecology into a space opera with sandworms, he confessed. The director disowned the film so completely that he used the pseudonym Alan Smithy on extended cuts, preferring anonymity to association with the mutilated result. The cast's descent into madness filming. Dune became a psychological endurance test that pushed the entire cast beyond their limits, creating performances born from genuine suffering rather than acting technique. Kyle MacLachlan, making his film debut as Paul Atreides, revealed that Lynch's unconventional directing methods left actors confused about their characters' motivations for months. Lynch refused to explain the plot to his cast, insisting they discover their roles organically through the filming process. This approach worked for Lynch's previous intimate films, but became catastrophic when applied to Herbert's complex universe. Sean Young admitted that she never understood Lady Jessica's character until reading the novel years after filming completed. The desert shooting in Mexico created conditions that bordered on dangerous. Temperatures exceeded 120 degrees, sandstorms halted production for days, and the isolated location meant medical help was hours away. Jürgen Prochnow suffered severe dehydration that required hospitalization, while Max von Sydow developed respiratory problems from the artificial spice atmosphere. Kenneth Macmillan's portrayal of Baron Harkonnen required 6 hours of daily makeup application that left him claustrophobic and disoriented. The elaborate prosthetics caused skin reactions that became infected in the desert heat. Macmillan later described the experience as playing a monster while slowly becoming one myself. The physical and psychological toll on the cast created an atmosphere of genuine despair that Lynch incorporated into the film's oppressive tone. Special effects that defied reality. Dune's practical effects were so ambitious that they nearly bankrupted the production while creating visuals that remained stunning 40 years later. What audiences never realized was that every effect required innovative techniques that had never been attempted at such scale. The sandworms alone cost more than most films' entire budgets and took 3 years to perfect. Carlo Rambaldi, fresh from his E.T. success, built mechanical sandworms over 40 feet long that required teams of operators hidden inside the creatures. The complexity was staggering. Each worm contained hydraulic systems for mouth movement, air bladders for body undulation, and motorized segments that created realistic locomotion through sand. The film's ornithopters presented another impossible challenge. The insect wing aircraft couldn't exist in reality, so effects supervisor Barry Nolan developed a combination of miniatures, matte paintings, and mechanical rigs that created the illusion of functional dragonfly flight. Each ornithopter required 200 individual wing beats per second, achieved through high-speed cameras and painstaking frame-by-frame animation. Lynch's vision for the spice melange required effects that visualized consciousness expansion and prescient visions. The blue within blue eyes effect used contact lenses so uncomfortable that actors could only wear them for minutes at a time. The Navigator's mutation scenes employed grotesque prosthetics that took makeup artists months to design. These weren't simple monster effects, they were attempts to visualize concepts that existed only in Herbert's imagination. The Weirding Way and sound design revolution. Lynch's interpretation of Herbert's Weirding Way combat created one of cinema's most controversial creative decisions, transforming mystical martial arts into sonic weapons that horrified purist fans but revolutionized film sound design. The decision emerged from Lynch's obsession with sound as a narrative element rather than simple effect. Herbert's novel describes the Weirding Way as superhuman combat skills taught by the Bene Gesserit. Lynch realized that filming traditional fight scenes would reduce these abilities to basic martial arts, losing their mystical significance. His solution, sonic weapons powered by specific vocal tones, allowed sound itself to become a character in the story. Sound designer Alan Splett spent 2 years creating the film's audio landscape, recording everything from whale songs to industrial machinery to create Dune's alien soundscape. The weirding modules required sounds that felt both technological and organic, leading to experiments with synthesized vocal harmonics that had never been attempted in cinema. The most innovative aspect was Lynch's use of silence as a weapon itself. The desert scenes employ absolute quiet that makes every sound feel amplified and threatening. When Paul first uses his voice powers, the sudden sonic assault feels genuinely shocking, because audiences have been conditioned to expect silence. This approach influenced decades of science fiction sound design, proving that audio innovation could drive narrative as effectively as visual spectacle. The spice must flow. Hidden environmental messages. Beneath Dune's space opera surface lies Frank Herbert's prescient environmental warning that Lynch tried desperately to preserve despite studio pressure to emphasize action over ecology. The spice melange serves as a metaphor for oil dependency that feels more relevant today than when the film was released. Herbert wrote Dune as a cautionary tale about resource exploitation and environmental destruction. Arrakis represents any desert region rich in valuable resources but inhabited by people who understand sustainable living. The Fremen's water conservation rituals mirror real desert culture's survival strategies, while the Empire's spice addiction parallels industrial civilization's unsustainable consumption patterns. Lynch embedded visual cues throughout the film that reinforce these themes. The grotesque Baron Harkonnen literally consumes resources without producing anything, representing pure parasitic capitalism. His floating movement symbolizes disconnect from natural limitations, while his diseased appearance shows the physical cost of environmental destruction. The film's most powerful environmental message appears in Paul's prescient visions of jihad spreading across the universe. These scenes weren't about religious warfare. They represented ecological collapse spreading from planet to planet as civilizations consumed their resources and moved on. Lynch's original cut included extended sequences showing this environmental devastation, but studios removed them to focus on sword fights and political intrigue. The ecological wisdom that made Herbert's novel profound was sacrificed for commercial palatability. The extended cuts that restore genius. Multiple versions of Dune exist, and the differences between them reveal the ongoing battle between Lynch's artistic vision and commercial demands. The theatrical cut runs 137 minutes, but Lynch's original assembly was over 4 hours long. Television edits restore some deleted material while adding new problems. The extended television version includes crucial scenes explaining the political background that the theatrical cut assumes audiences understand. We see the Emperor's fear of House Atreides' growing power, the Spacing Guild's spice dependency, and the Bene Gesserit's breeding program. These additions make the story coherent, but destroy Lynch's pacing and visual poetry. Most fascinating are the deleted character moments that would have transformed audience perception of the main players. Patrick Stewart's Gurney Halleck had extensive scenes showing his musical talents and emotional depth beyond warrior loyalty. Virginia Madsen's Princess Irulan served as more than narrator, actively participating in political machinations that shaped the story's outcome. The lost footage reveals Lynch's true intentions for the film. Extended dream sequences show Paul's psychological journey toward messianic consciousness. Deleted Fremen scenes explore their ecological philosophy and relationship with Arrakis. These elements would have created the meditative, philosophical epic Lynch envisioned rather than the rushed adventure that reached theaters. Fans continue hoping for a complete director's cut that may never be released due to legal complications, and Lynch's continued disavowal of the project. The cultural legacy of beautiful failure. Dune 1984 occupies a unique position in cinema history as simultaneously one of the most ambitious failures and most influential cult films ever created. Its commercial disappointment freed Lynch from Hollywood expectations while inspiring countless filmmakers to attempt similarly impossible adaptations. The film's influence on production design cannot be overstated. The ornithopter designs influenced aircraft development in video games and animation. The still suit costumes inspired functional fashion that appeared in later science fiction films. Even the controversial sonic weapons became templates for depicting psychic powers in visual media. Lynch's Dune proved that faithful literary adaptation might be impossible when the source material challenges cinema's fundamental limitations. Herbert's novel operates through internal monologue and philosophical exposition that resist visual translation. Lynch's failure taught Hollywood that some books require reimagining rather than simple translation. The film's reputation has transformed over decades from embarrassing disaster to misunderstood masterpiece. Modern audiences, accustomed to complex narratives and franchise storytelling, appreciate Lynch's ambitious attempt to preserve Herbert's intellectual complexity. The recent Denis Villeneuve adaptation succeeds partly because Lynch's failure established what doesn't work, allowing new approaches to emerge. Dune 1984 remains essential viewing for understanding the tension between artistic vision and commercial reality. Its beautiful failure demonstrates that reaching for impossible goals can create something more interesting than safe success. These revelations expose Dune 1984 as far more than a failed adaptation. It's a document of artistic ambition destroyed by commercial fear and creative interference. From Lynch's betrayal by producers to the cast's genuine suffering in Mexican deserts, every aspect of this film represents the collision between visionary storytelling and Hollywood business practices. If these buried truths fascinated you, subscribe to our channel and activate notifications for more explorations of cinema's most complex disasters and hidden masterpieces. What other failed films do you believe contain misunderstood brilliance? Share your thoughts in the comments, and recommend this analysis to viewers who dismiss Dune without understanding its tragic history.